Previewing the 2012 NFL season with Troy Aikman, I'm Tom Voort. Troy, a lot of great storylines in the NFL. There are every single year, but let's start right at the top with 4 teams, maybe you see 2 from each league as being the contenders to play for that championship in New Orleans.
Well, I think looking at the teams that I like within the conferences, I mean, as I've said, the Green Bay Packers to me are the best team in the league, and you know I see them coming out of the NFC and going on to the Super Bowl. And I guess if they say, okay, well then who would be a contender other than them? I don't know. I guess I'd go with Philadelphia since I like them coming out of the East, but I think the contender with the Packers is going to come out of the East, whether that's the Eagles, Giants, or the Cowboys, and then in the AFC, I just think New England's a hard team to bet against. Tom Brady's been outstanding, and Bill Belichick, and what they've done really speaks for itself. And as I've said before, defensively they surprised me last year to get as far as they did with a defense that I thought was really poor, and I think they've addressed some of that. So I believe that they'll be better on that side of the ball, and so I like New England. And then if I was going with another team besides them, I don't know. I guess just a team that I've kind of pulled for is San Diego, the Chargers. But I like Denver as well, and so I think those 3 teams, as far as the AFC is concerned, and if I had to say, okay, what 2 teams do I think are going to make it into the Super Bowl? I think it's going to be Packers-Patriots is who I would pick as we sit here in preseason.
Well, you talk about those 2 teams, and you mentioned defense. They're obviously led by their offenses. They're led by their quarterbacks. What is the role of a defense in the NFL these days? Because you look at them statistically, they give up a lot of yards, maybe less so points. How do you manage a game from a defensive standpoint when you're, we used to call it bend but not break, that kind of thing. How are defenses approaching the game these days?
I think that's kind of what it is. I think it's gotten harder to be a great defensive team. I mean, it's harder to play defense because of the rules that have been implemented, and player safety. I mean, trying to intimidate players and hit them coming over the middle, and not making, not wanting receivers to want to come back over again, and hitting the quarterback. There's a lot of things that I think were really inherent in really good defensive football that you just really can't do anymore. And that's why we're seeing offenses as prolific as we have seen, and quarterbacks putting up historic numbers. And I don't see that changing. And so, if you're a defensive player or a defensive coach, you really have your work cut out for you. And I think in some ways where you've got to then be good is in the red zone. It's too easy for teams to move the ball, from 20 to 20. And then when the field shrinks, well, now, okay, you're finally starting to have an advantage defensively. And I think that's where you got to be good. Some of the other stats probably are not as important as they once were to be a good defensive team.
Right, because it is, after all, about scoring. And then when you talk about the red zone, how does the role of the tight end kind of affect that? Now we see these big athletic guys. We've talked about it with the Patriots. There are obviously a lot of these tight ends in the leagues. Antonio Gates in San Diego, a lot of names you could name. How does the tight end affect what goes on in the red zone for football teams?
Well, I mean, you got guys like Tony Gonzalez and Jason Witten and those type of guys who just create problems. I mean, when you have good outside receivers, then they draw a lot of attention. They draw a lot of attention from the safeties, and then it opens up the middle of the field. And there was a time when you got down in there years ago, back when I was playing. I mean, shoot, we bunched everybody up. We turned and handed the ball to Emmitt Smith, and scored touchdowns. And now we're seeing more and more teams spread people out and take advantage of some of those inside matchups that tight ends present.
Is there a skill that quarterbacks have to have these days that maybe you didn't have to have as much of when you were playing, as far as reading defenses or some of the things that they're throwing at the quarterbacks now that they maybe didn't used to do as much?
I don't know if there's any more skill that they need to have. It's a different mentality now. Because it is so much dictated by the play of the quarterback. And is that good? I think it's good for the game. I mean, I think that football's never been more popular than it is right now. I know that the game's coming down to the last 4 minutes as to who's going to win or lose the game is exciting. It's great from my perspective as a broadcaster. It's great for the viewing audience. Not great for those coaches that are on the sidelines, you know, and because every fan expects their team to be the team that none of these rules really apply to.
Right.
But I think for the quarterbacks, because there is so much expected of them and they have to play so well for their team to win, I think it takes, you know, a personality and a guy who's okay dealing with that, you know, and you know, the guys who we've seen that have played at a really high level are guys that have handled that pressure very well.
And does that in turn mean that the defensive strategy or the defensive thing that you want to accomplish is to disrupt the quarterback?
Yeah, that has not changed. You know, you know, you've always wanted to hit the quarterback. Right. You've always wanted to, which has made it more and more frustrating for defenses because you're not able to hit them quite like you were. You know, you can still hit them, but you got, you know, the target's gotten a lot smaller.
Right.
But they know, these coaches know that, you know, the quarterbacks are too good, they're too well coached, and they throw the ball too straight, that if you don't get there and you don't disrupt them, and if you don't hit them and at least knock them off of their target from time to time, you just can't hold up. I mean, the players have just gotten too good, and so that's the challenge that these defenses all face.
Now, speaking of quarterbacks, we got a couple new ones coming into the league. Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin III. What can fans reasonably expect from these guys? If they want to see progress from these guys this year, what are they going to be seeing?
Well, I think the fans, the fans expect greatness, you know, right away. That's just the way that fans are, and not realistic, obviously. But, you know, there was a time when the only quarterback really who had had any success to speak of as a rookie was Dan Marino. And in the last 10 years or so, it's been remarkable how many quarterbacks, rookies, have stepped in and played really, really well. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, Matt Ryan, Joe Flacco. You know, last year Cam Newton comes in. There have been guys, a lot of guys, and I'm leaving players out, I know, that have come in and have done a really nice job. And so, me knowing how hard it is to come in as a rookie and play well, I still tend to look at it through my own eyes and say, wow, it's asking a lot for a guy to come in and really have much of an impact. But I think that quarterbacks in college coming into the pros are so much, I don't want to say better coached, but they get more reps throwing the ball, and they're seeing more NFL defenses at the collegiate level, that it helps them in their preparation. So I expect RG3 to have a pretty good season this year. I think he's got a good supporting cast around him. I think he's got a good coach that'll do some things that he's good at, moving the pocket. Andrew Luck does not have quite the same supporting cast. I think it'll be a little bit more of a struggle for him, but he too, I think he'll play better than a lot of other quarterbacks traditionally have their rookie season.
Now, one guy that's going to get a lot of focus through the year, and a team that's going to get a lot of focus because of him, the New York Jets, Tim Tebow. There's a lot going on in New York. Is that hard for a football team, and what do you expect out of the New York Jets?
Yeah, I don't expect much out of the Jets. I really don't. I just think that, you know, we say it all the time, it's a quarterback-driven league, and if you've got to play well at that position in order to win. And I just think that for Mark Sanchez to already have to be dealing with the questions of Tim Tebow and that circus, I just don't think it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna work out very well. I just don't. I mean, I hope that it does. I hope it works out for Sanchez. I hope it works out for Tebow. I hope it works out for the Jets.
So in a way, it's hard to see it working out for everybody, and that's the problem. Because if it works out for Tebow, it's not going to work out for Sanchez. And if it works out,
I just think that yeah, for as a guy who played quarterback in this league, I don't know that there's many offensive coaches that really understand offensive football that would have brought in would have brought in Tim Tebow to be the backup to their quarterback. I just don't think that would have happened. You know, I mean, things went really well there in Denver last year for Tim Tebow, and they were able to make the playoffs and they won a playoff game. And what happened? They brought in Peyton Manning.
Right.
You know, and I think that John Elway recognized that, you know, we need more than this if we're going to win in today's NFL. And in New York, not that they're saying Tim Tebow is going to be the starter, but they've pretty much said he's going to have a role within that. I mean, he's not simply the backup. He's going to have a role within that offense. And I think that that's going to be a real challenge for a guy like Mark Sanchez, who is still in the process of really establishing himself in this league. I just don't see a good ending with that situation.
It's always kind of ridiculous to pick who the champion's going to be at the beginning of the season. There's so much that's going to happen. I mean, injuries first and foremost among those things. But let's just say that the Patriots and the Packers do get to the Super Bowl. If I had to pin you down to a pick before the season, you know, we'll call it trying to call a home run before the batter gets up to the plate. Who are you going to pick in that matchup in the Super Bowl?
I'd probably go with the Packers. You know, there was a time not long ago you wouldn't bet against Belichick and Brady, and you know, the last couple of Super Bowls, of course, both those being against the Giants, you know, they've been beaten, and I think the Packers, looking at those two teams, are the better team.
There you go. To rebound for Troy Aikman, I'm Tom Vandervoort. That's our look before the season at the 2012 NFL season. Thanks for watching.